Welcome, everybody. Call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Seating of alternates, I think we're full board. So there won't be any seating of alternates. The explanation of the meeting format. So thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thank you, Housing Trust. Thank you, Habitat, for making it out. This is something as planning and zoning that's been asked over a period of years as far as like a question and answer, a forum, if you will. So planning and zoning wanted to reach out to these two organizations to see if they would be interested in doing something like this, and they very quickly and eagerly said yes. So thank you and thank you. I really appreciate it. The meeting, so we have an hour and a half slated, so we'll go till 7:30 if needed. To be clear, we're not going to rehash the past, okay? We're not going to spend the time about the legality of the IHC. We're not going to spend any time about the legality of the planning and zoning's approval of site plan approval. And, so that's already been done. Tonight is to answer some questions. So we had a list of questions that the planning and zoning came up with. And so we'll ask each side, and then we'll give them a chance to answer through the questions. The follow-up after the printed questions that they've had before, we'll open it up to the planning and zoning commission seated over here. Thank you all for any questions they may have, and then we'll go to public discussion. Okay. So we'll probably try to limit everything to around 2 minutes. If it takes longer organically, we're not going to necessarily hold you as long as it's on topic and moving forward. Okay. Does that sound like good rules? Okay. This is Janelle, our zoning enforcement officer, for those that may not be familiar with her. So she's here to help me technically on any zoning questions that we might have that I can't answer. So we'll start with the first question, and I'll just read it aloud. And then, like I said, I think we'll just go side to side, let each organization answer. Do you think that'd be okay to go side to side and each answer?
Yeah, I think that's right.
So question number one, both organizations, the Falls Village Housing Trust and Habitat for Humanity, Northwest Connecticut, please describe the current projects you have slated for the town of Canaan, Falls Village. Feel free to describe projects aside from the River Road location. So I'll ask the Falls Village Housing Trust first. Jandy, thank you so much.
I'm Jandy Hanna. I'm the president of the Falls Village Housing Trust, and I'm really glad to see a lot of people here with interest in this very important area of need in our town and other towns like us. So the answer to your question about current projects is the Falls Village Housing Trust has the apartments, which are located on Minor and Prospect Street, 2 buildings there that make up 5 units. 3 of them at 21 Prospect are currently being renovated, and the other 2 will be done later. The other project we have is the River Road Homes project, which has been in the planning stages for many years, and many of you know that. And it is for 16 rental units, which is new construction.
Thank you. Housekeeping, I forgot to mention, the owls this is not a Zoom meeting, but these are owls recording for the Planning and Zoning Commission's use. So any murmuring, any discussion, you absolutely will be picked up and you'll be recorded. So should have maybe said that before Judy made all those comments. Just kidding, of course. Bob.
Hi, I'm Bob Whalen. I'm the president of Habitat for Humanity of Northwest Connecticut. And I want to thank everybody from Falls Village and the Planning and Zoning Commission for attending. It's much appreciated. I'd like to get as much information as possible and to discuss these things because it's all pretty much in flux. As you probably all are aware, Habitat has had this 80-acre parcel on River Road for quite a while. And we actually started with a 100-acre parcel on which we constructed 4 homes across the street of varying lot sizes, but generally with 3 bedrooms. And our intention is to, after we've transferred the property over to the Falls Village Housing Trust, we'll have 70 acres that will remain on River Road. Of those, we would like to take 2 of those acres to construct a project. The Falls Village Housing Trust will take 10 of the acres, and the other 68 acres will be being hopefully transferred over to the Northwest Connecticut Land Conservancy for recreational purposes here in Falls Village. They will utilize our shared driveway and the Habitat's shared driveway. We will provide maintenance on the driveway, and this will give residents and others access to the Blue Trail, which runs basically from Lookout Point all the way over to Dean's Ravine and Music Mountain Road. So it'll become a recreational resource for the town. So we've had some experience in Falls Village building a number of homes. We typically work on scattered site development. The project we're hoping to accomplish now incorporates the use of the incentive housing zone regulations and would potentially be upwards of 5 duplex units, depending on the, if you will, rhythms by the Torrington Area Health District. Thank you.
So again, bear with me, this is all organic, but do you want to introduce your team?
Sure, if I may, this is Amanda Branson of the Northwest Connecticut Land Conservancy, representing that organization who's working with us on the preservation element of the 68 acres. And Keith Bodwell, who has been our surveyor and engineer, who has developed some of the initial plans for us to actually bring the project to Torrington Area Health, and then obviously necessarily to planning and zoning for final approval.
Thank you.
And I would like to introduce Jocelyn Eyre, who many of you know. She's been working with the town in various jobs for over the years. She now is the director of the initials are CHO.
The Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity.
Right, so she helps regionalize, and she is a consultant to the Falls Village Housing Trust. Thank you. And we also have Dave Mallison, who is a member of our board of directors for the Falls Village Housing Trust. He is a realtor and a builder, and he brings us all sorts of really helpful skills.
Thank you. Question number 2. If I'm trying to raise my voice, sometimes I'm not aware of the level of it. So if you need me to raise it, I'll try more, and the same for our speakers. Number 2, what is the proposed timeline or target timeline for completion of the project or projects? When do you anticipate submitting for zoning permit approvals? When do you endeavor to be breaking ground? Do you plan to complete the construction in phases or as quickly as possible?
I'm going to ask Dave to speak about that.
So addressing the River Road project with the Housing Trust, all zoning permit approvals are in place. And we plan to break ground on River Road in the spring of 2026. Infrastructure, wells, roads, septic systems, etc., will be the first priority. And then the homes will follow. We hope to complete the development in 2027.
Thank you.
The timeline for what the development would look like from Habitat's perspective is driven by a number of different factors, none the least of which is going to be approvals as well as by Torrington Area Health District. This is all still in a rough phase. It's just been kind of a hallucination of Habitats for a long time about what to do with the remainder of the property. So our anticipated time for completion of the project is 10 years, to be honest with you. And we anticipate submitting for zoning approvals in early 2026. We're hopeful, based on what information we get from Torrington Area Health. We would anticipate breaking ground either late 2026 or early 2027. We're in the midst of completing a project today in North Canaan, and then we would be available to move over to that site once we have all the approvals. And we would definitely complete the project in phases, because rather than obtaining all the funding through the Department of Housing, Habitat finances all of its own projects internally through the mortgages that we give to people when they purchase the homes from us.
Number 3, are there any elements in the proposed site plan that are being considered for modification, i.e. lot line modification, number of units, lighting, driveway configuration, parking landscaping, etc.?
So for the, again, addressing that project at River Road, we plan to request a reduction in the amount of lighting. And no other modifications are being proposed at this time.
May I add something to that, Dave? I just want to add in reference to what Bob Whalen was talking about with Habitat. We have recently agreed with Habitat to have an easement going across the bottom corner of our property, so that they will have access to their planned development, and that the conservation folks will have access to their driveway and parking lot. That's just one other thing.
Thank you.
The elements of the proposed site plan that we have are, as I mentioned, completely in flux at this stage of the game. We're still working with Keith and the powers that be, if you will, to determine exactly what this project is going to look like. All that we know is our goal is to hold on to 2 acres of the existing property today and build whatever we can build on it. When we first came before Greg and the P&Z Commission to get some idea of what their receptiveness to the idea would be, we came actually with 3 plans, which extended from building 2 individual homes to the 5 duplexes that we showed them. And it was, quite frankly, through their consideration and their encouragement that we are working as hard as we can right now to make it be the 5 duplexes that we would like to see. But the structure of how that would work is still in flux as well, because Habitat, as you know, is pretty well known for working with scattered site development, not with rentals, not with co-ops, not with condominiums. That's not our model. So we're still in the process of developing what that model will even look like for us. Thank you.
Number 4, currently, what are the biggest obstacles to getting your project to the next step in the process? What do you see as the biggest impediment to your project's overall completion?
I'm gonna ask Jocelyn to take this question.
Just so everyone, if everyone's not familiar with our work, we work across Litchfield County with 12 different local housing nonprofits like the Falls Village Housing Trust, and we're working on 15 different affordable housing developments, homeownership and rental developments across the region, helping local all volunteer groups like Falls Village Housing Trust get access to funding, set up their teams, run their teams, help with ongoing day-to-day project management on all of these projects. So one thing I will say is I know folks feel like this is going very slowly, the River Road Homes development. It's really not unfortunately, it's not going much more slowly than any of the other projects in the towns that we are working on. These projects take a very long time. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective. From my perspective, it's unfortunate that it takes so long. I would say that this project isn't really facing any different obstacles than other projects in the region. A lot of the obstacles are around funding and funding timelines, different all of these projects require at least 4 or 5 different funding sources. And the timing of the different funding rounds, you have to get this piece before you get this piece. Sometimes if your project isn't competitive in one funding round, you have to just wait for the next one and go back in. So anyway, it's timing of the funding rounds, and then frankly, and if any of you have tried to build a home or even renovate part of your home, you know how hard it is to get your, sorry, Keith, but your civil engineer out there, or your surveyor, maybe not Keith, but I won't name names, but other folks, you know, the contractors around here are very busy. And so just like getting people lined up to do what you need them to do when you need them to do it. But we've got a great team on River Road Homes. So, you know, I think we can, you know, continue to work together to make progress. I don't think, again, there's any specific obstacles that we're not seeing, just generally on how long these projects take in all of the towns that we're working in.
Thank you.
As far as we're, at this point, believing in terms of obstacles, the number one for us will be obviously approvals and what we will be able to do based on what Torrington Area Health will permit us and the Falls Village Planning and Zoning Committee will allow us to do. So the engineering is a deep concern, but we're trying to feel that out so that we don't make a great deal of an investment in engineering until we have a better sense of what we can actually accomplish. And then obviously funding, because as I mentioned, we are completely internally funded. And while we have a cash flow that emanates from our principal only mortgages that we give to our partners, that causes us to kind of stretch out our timelines in terms of what we can build and how fast we can build it, and rather than have to go deep to the well or go back to donors. So it's a function of, you know, a lot of different moving parts, but there's no major obstacle other than those that are actually readily identifiable in any construction project.
Thank you, Ron. Number 5, what is the total project cost? How much of the funding have you secured? What are your expected future sources of funding?
Jocelyn's our expert on that.
Okay. Housing right now, some of you might be shocked by this, but whether it's homeownership or rental, but you know, a simple, decent, but energy efficient, you know, apartment unit or home costs somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000 a unit now. So those are the numbers that we're looking at for, and that's all in. That's not just construction, but total costs when you add in your architect and your, you know, your civil engineer and your, you know, construction loan interest and all of those things, all of that adds up. And the total development cost is again, somewhere between 400 and 500,000 a unit. So again, that's why we have to go to a lot of different funding sources to raise the funds that we need to make those work. And in terms of what the Falls Village Housing Trust has committed already, the Connecticut Department of Housing has provided Falls Village Housing Trust with a pre-development loan that they've had for a while that allowed them to get to this point and get through the planning and zoning process. They also have a pre-development loan increase that's committed to them that we're closing on any minute now, that will help them continue to get to where we can bid out the infrastructure work. As many of you also know, they do have a HUD grant as well to work on the infrastructure work over there. And it was a very long environmental review process, but that has been completed. So the committed sources of funding are that HUD Community Project Funding Grant and the Department of Housing pre-development grant. Again, the Department of Housing is very interested in this project, otherwise they wouldn't be investing in it now in pre-development. I meet with them monthly to update them on all of the projects going on in Litchfield County, and they're very interested in continuing to invest in this project. Department of Housing funding is usually the largest piece of funding that goes into these projects. So, once we have that in place, we'll be ready to go. We also we'll probably look to Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, which we do for all of the developments in Litchfield County. So if, all of those pieces of funding line up and we believe that this project is coming, those are the pieces that will make up the total development cost of this project.
In Habitat's case, we have experience building 3 identical homes since 2020. And we have seen that 1,200 square foot home accelerated cost from roughly $210,000 exclusive of land to almost $280,000 presently. So we are seeing great increases in construction costs, labor costs, and so forth. And we do, despite the fact that we're able to utilize a lot of volunteer labor, still need professionals to accomplish certain parts of it for safety reasons and obviously for code reasons. At this stage of the game, Habitat has a fairly substantial resource pool available to it right now to work with this. We anticipate some funding to be coming as a consequence of our transaction with the Falls Village Housing Trust, which we will put into the bank to help fund that project. And we hope as well, when we give off the land for conservation, we will also obtain a rather interesting pool of resources that will at least get us really started on the project and keep us going, we hope, for 5 or 6 years, while we're also taking on cash flow from the existing mortgages. We, again, don't see any real impediments to the costs, except that we are not 100% sure about parts of what we're going to be building. But if we took it and looked at it as a roughly $300 per square foot cost to do construction these days, utilizing volunteer labor with materials, I think that that would be a fair estimate. But at this point, we don't know if we're building 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, how many bedroom operations we're putting together, or the size of each of the units. So it's still kind of a crapshoot. So we don't have an anticipated cost at this time.
Thank you, Bob. And 6, upon completion, how will the project be maintained? How will maintenance be funded?
So we, the Falls Village Housing Trust, will hire a professional property manager to manage and maintain the 16 units at River Road Homes. The maintenance is funded through the rents, and the rents support the costs of the project, including property management fees, mowing, plowing, repairs, etc.
Upon completion, the project will be being maintained, Habitat's project, by Habitat. Number one, we will be providing to the NCLC and or whichever conservation group we work with access to the property, and we will commit to plowing that common road that we will have that will give access both to the recreational aspects of the property as well as to whatever it is that we are able to develop. So there will be that. We're working on the details because, again, in our environment, we always own the land. We never sell that. We only sell the improvements. So we will be ultimately responsible for the maintenance of that property. With what we anticipate at this stage of the game, because it's going to be our first multifamily type of development, some type of an HOA that would either be able to self-sustain, or that Habitat will manage on a top end and make sure that all of the property maintenance, snow plowing, and those aspects are taken care of. So that's our anticipation at this stage of the game. But because it's ownership, we're very fortunate to work with a banking partner that is also providing us with loan servicing services. So they actually handle all of the allocation of the resources, both inbound from the renters, the owners, and outbound for taxes and for insurance. So.
So number 7 kind of parlays by necessity had to answer partial, but I'll read it again. And just for everybody's clarity, in the IAC zone, per our regulations, an administrating agency is required for these projects. The way that it's written for IHC zones, the P and Z could be, if they choose the administrating agency. We are not choosing to be that agency. So it has to be an agency picked by the property owner or developer and approved by our local board of selectmen. So with that, per our regulations, an administrating agency is required for these projects. The P and Z does not intend to fulfill this role locally. Who do you have in mind to serve as the administrating agency?
I'm going to ask Jocelyn to speak to that.
Yeah, so as many of you might know, I was involved in this, and in helping the town write the incentive housing zone regulation, so I know it pretty well. Although the administrating agency sounds like it's an onerous task. In my view, knowing what is in the regulation in terms of what the administrating agency has to make sure the developer does, I don't think it's onerous. There's a pretty clear list of what the administrating agency has to make sure the developer does. Basically, this is a way to make sure that if a developer comes in this case, the Falls Village Housing Trust, and says, we're gonna develop this and we're gonna comply with these affordability requirements, otherwise they wouldn't be eligible for the incentive housing zone, that some entity make sure that they are actually complying with the affordability requirements. Falls Village Housing Trust is going to have to comply with those in order to get funding from Connecticut Department of Housing. So my suggestion would be, and I'm happy to work with the Board of Selectmen or whoever else, because I do think that this I think that the way the regulation was written, it sort of devolves to the Board of Selectmen, sorry. If the Planning and Zoning Commission doesn't want to fill that role, but I'm happy to have the conversation with Department of Housing, whether they could verify that those specific affordability requirements in the incentive housing zone regulation are being met by the Falls Village Housing Trust. Again, because I think when I reviewed what those requirements are, they would have to be met by the Falls Village Housing Trust in order to access that funding anyway. So that could be, in theory, your third party review, to make sure that those requirements are being met. That's what I would suggest to the Board of Selectmen. And happy to work with them on getting the iron.
As mentioned, the Habitat for And as a consequence of that, there's a document that is part of the partnership agreement between Habitat and the partner, which dictates what the considerations would be, number one, of any future transfers of the property, in case somebody decides at a later point in time that they don't wish to be a partner anymore. We hold the property in perpetuity at right now the 60% of the area median income level for the family size. And we make sure that even in any transfers that have occurred, and there have been numerous over our 35 years of property transfers, because of the departure of partners, people moving on, getting new work. We've had people that have actually fully paid off their mortgages as well, but they still are subject completely to the regulations of what is called the ground lease, which demands that there has to be a transfer to somebody in a similar circumstance. Now, in terms of the requirements of the administrative agency, if there need be, and I would have to discuss this with David Berto in particular, but I was thinking that I would ask David through his organization. David Berto is a gentleman who owns a company called Housing Enterprises Incorporated, who's done an awful lot of work with providing a lot of the background financing and information resources to the Department of Housing and other housing organizations throughout the state. And I get the sense that it's possible that he could be a designated administrator for this to ensure that we're adhering to the regulations and maintaining the affordability ratios that we demand and that the IHC would demand. So that's all kind of to be determined, but we would certainly have to reach out because as it's been explained to me, although our documents are very clear on the fact, we still may have to have an outside agency that takes care of that.
I'll ask a question. With that, that's the list of the written questions. Again, some of these questions came from within our board. A lot came from our listening over time from citizens attending meetings. So we try to write down ahead of time what we thought was relevant to us and relevant to the community. And that we hope that we captured most of the questions that we had received in the past. But hopefully we did okay. We're gonna go next to any planning and zoning commissioners follow-up questions, and then we'll have public comment.
Well, I have one job, so we talk about the administrating agency during development, right? Well, 10 years from now, who's administering the income recertifications and leasing and making sure people are followed?
Yeah, just so you know that that isn't the role of the administering agency in your zoning regulation.
Okay,
But if you're asking just separately, who makes sure over time that the folks that live in these units are income eligible? Again, all of that, this will be deed restricted for at least 30 years due to the funding. And the deed restriction will be very clear about income eligibility. The professional property manager that's hired, typically it's Connecticut Realty Management, that's who does it around here. They are the ones that income certify the residents every year, and that make sure that all of the affordability requirements are being met. So that's how it, remains affordable and is administered over time.
thank you.
Vincent?
I was concerned about the funding and in these changing times we're in now, how reliable is that the funding money is there? It's just a question of time and being ready and meeting the qualifications. Or could the funding just dry up?
Again, luckily, so there is a little bit of federal money, the HUD community project funding money is in there. Most of the projects that we do not have federal money, and if that federal money went away, it's actually a pretty small proportion of what the total project cost will be. Most of the rest of the money is, again, State Department of Housing money. The state has a lot of money right now in the current bond allocations that Department of Housing has access to today. And so I'm not worried that that money is gonna dry up. As you probably heard that the state legislators understand we have a housing crisis and they need to be part of the solution. So I'm not worried about the state money drying up. The other funding we might tap into, again, Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, that money's not gonna go away, their affordable housing program. So yeah, I am not concerned. I mean, maybe if we get to if next November we have a new governor, then maybe we have to be worried, but I think as long as we get this across the finish line, which I think we will, the funding piece of it anyway, before we have a new possible governor, I think we're in good shape.
Stephen?
I have a follow-up, but it's a little more of a specific question. You talked about breaking ground in 2026, finishing the project in 2027, but you're still going after some funding. Do you have money allocated for the beginning of this project to start in 2026 to clear the land, to build the infrastructure you're discussing. How much of that funding is already secured? And then to follow up with that, if you have that part of the funding done and you clear the land, put in roads and put in septic, and then you lose funding or don't have funding, will that affect the 2027 completion date? And do you have alternate ideals to achieve those goals if it stops? Because basically we're worried as a community, I think, about starting a project, having open space created and then left in such a way that changes the landscape without finishing a project.
That was a long question. I'm trying to remember all the pieces of it, but.
Where's your funding? How much do you have ahead of time? And if the funding stops, do you have a contingency plan to make sure that the property looks a certain way after you don't complete?
Yeah, I mean, okay, again, I think that, so we have the funding to start doing the infrastructure. Again, that's the federal funding, so we do have to wait for the federal government to reopen, which hopefully this isn't wood. It will soon. You know, actually, that money isn't gonna go very far. We'll get some driveways in. And in the meantime, we'll be working at the same time to bid out the actual construction of the units. The reason we have to do them separately, again, this isn't unusual, is because the federal money triggers some specific federal wage requirements that makes the whole project more expensive. So if we do it all together in one piece, then we have to follow those federal wage requirements for the whole project. And so this is happening in Falls Village and in Spark Hampstead and Morris, where we have federal money for infrastructure. So we do the infrastructure first, so we don't have to use the federal wage requirements for the whole project, because it would just make it cost even more than what I was talking about. So
Well, your costs are about $877.5 million to $8 million for 16 units using your figures. And if you don't have that money and you only have money for the infrastructure, it makes me a little nervous that somehow you're gonna need to wait for $7 million to
yeah.
start the project.
We, like I said, we are in constant communication with the Department of Housing, which is where a lot of that money will come from. And so I am not, I know you guys don't like work in this world every day, so I understand your questions and your concerns, but you know, there's not a lot of work that's gonna get done for the infrastructure piece. And right on the heels of it, we'll start construction of the, you know, because again, we're in communication with Department of Housing. We have to get through that process and then bid out the construction of the units, and then we can start, you know, get the commitment of funds from DOH for the rest of it. So, you know, I really don't think there's gonna be as big of a gap of time between when we finish the infrastructure work and when we can start the construction work. But we do have to keep moving through the process to get there.
Thank you.
Well, I have a question for the Housing Trust. So you put a start breakdown of 26 and by 27 of the units. That seems an aggressive timetable. And it seems like it could have a really big impact construction wise on the local citizens in that area. I'm sure that'll be taken into consideration. But Dave, you kind of know that's a lot of activity in really, it may sound like a long amount of time, but to me, that's not a long amount of time to finish that. So if you could just speak a little bit about the sensitivity that I'm concerned about for that area of our town during construction.
Sure, I mean, 16 housing units don't get built overnight. And breaking ground in a few months and going 24 months is aggressive, absolutely. portion of the project is contained. We're not building 24 houses up and down the road. Right? We're not building 16 homes up and down the road. It's more efficient when things are concentrated. That's our timeline now.
Right.
Okay, things are always subject to change. Supplier delivery delays, etc. As far as sensitivity to the community, you have norms in this town about, we're not going to be working at 10 o'clock at night. Okay. We might have to block a part of the road, part of the time, and get it done, and beyond that as quickly as possible. We don't want to inconvenience anyone. We are concentrated into a small area. And I know there's a curve there. I know there's railroad tracks there, but we also know there are neighbors there. We have to respect that. We understand it. There will be something happening there for the next couple of years, starting in 2026. We don't want to put anybody out. Okay, it's not going to be that much different than a neighbor building a house next door.
If I could add to that, we, in our conditions of our approval, we agreed to a time of day. I think it was between 7 a.m. and 4 or 5 p.m. But it was, the conditions were that the building day, working day would not be longer than that. There is a new culvert that's going to go under the road, and that will disrupt people for a day or two, perhaps. But that's not a lengthy project. There will be big trucks coming in and out, well digging trucks and cement trucks, things just as you would expect for any building site. But I agree with, of course, what Dave Mallison has said. We're interested in keeping people as comfortable as possible with what's going on.
Thank you. Also, you mentioned, I think you didn't say it as many words, but I think you alluded to prevailing wage because of the cost of the project and the source of the funding. Yeah, what is the current figure of extra costs for prevailing wage? This has nothing to do with zoning. This is just a curiosity
I don't
question.
know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I just know that I hear a lot, most of the funding that we use does not trigger prevailing wage, or Davis Bacon, because we don't use that much federal money in these projects, except for, again, maybe a little bit of infrastructure. I don't know. I just hear horror stories from the rest of the state when they do get money that triggers those.
So just to clarify, you didn't necessarily say it would be a prevailing wage job if it went in one phase?
If,
I thought I
if
heard.
if we bundled the whole project together with the federal money, it would trigger all of it to be
Oh, just
prevailing wage.
portions.
Yeah. So the federal piece of it, the infrastructure piece of it will require prevailing wage, is my understanding.
And that's more the infrastructure, roads, septic.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's
wells.
not that much money in the grand scheme of things, so there won't be that much that happens with that money, but yeah, those wage requirements will be there for that piece of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
To partially answer your question too, Greg, back when I was a builder, we did do some projects where federal wages were involved. Not only is it crazy expensive, but it fluctuates. So even if Jocelyn could give you a number now, 3 months from now, that federal wage requirement could change. And it could change by trade as well.
Right.
So that's a tough question to answer.
Well, thank you for your help. I appreciate it. Anything else further from the commission?
I have one other thought. Robert talked about how the increase from 220 to 280,000 over the last couple of years. The Housing Works project was started how many years ago? I remember 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And
Yeah.
the estimate of cost at that time was this. And I assume it's this now. Is that correct? Have you allotted for that? I'm thinking.
This and that.
Yeah.
What size hand do you have?
That- I assume it's gone up, 30%, 40% or more from the original.
Yeah, again, this is not just this project or just projects in Falls Village, this is statewide,
Yeah.
countrywide, and so. Yeah, now, Department of Housing used to give you this, and now they have to give you this, and they know that, so.
Okay, that's what I wondered. I mean, did the idea for a certain amount of funds come, and now they've increased that pot of funds?
Yeah, like I said, they have plenty of money, at the state, to provide for projects like this one. And what they understand that they're not happy about it. No, none of us are happy about how much this costs, but, they understand they have to contribute more than they used to these projects because they cost more.
We'll get Stephen. Stephen,
This is probably not even a planning and zoning, or it's more of a citizen question. Is there any expectation that Falls Village residents will have, because of the federal funding or anything, there's no way to skew or any way to help Falls Village residents exclusively or get part of it? Do you have to, because you're getting funding from all these other places, do you have to open it up to so many people that a Falls Village resident might have a lot less opportunity to be able to live in one of these units?
This is one of my favorite questions. And here's the first way I always answer this question, which is, I wasn't a resident of my town until I moved there, and now I am. And so if people don't currently live in Falls Village and then they move here, they're gonna become Falls Village residents and they'll be able to work in Falls Village jobs and, contribute to volunteer opportunities. And if you don't have this housing, you won't have it for people who grew up in Falls Village or who you want to move to Falls Village. And so I always just want to start with that because I feel like there's this sense that, anyway, that's my opinion about it. There are fair housing rules, they apply to everyone. They apply to you, whether you are doing affordable housing or market rate housing. You can't just say this is only for people. And again, if you limited it to Falls Village residents, would be Falls Village residents that lived here for 2 days, 2 years, 20 years. How long do you have to be a Falls Village resident in order to so anyway, so the answer to your question is that the Falls Village Housing Trust developments won't be, will take applications from folks. Again, what we see across the region is that people from the community that either work here, live here, have family here, are usually the ones that find out first and that apply first. And when a new project opens up, there is usually a lottery process, but then people get on a waiting list. For example, in Salisbury, we have 130 households on our waiting list for our rental housing right now. And then it's first come, first serve. And frankly, the people that can wait longest are like the kid that's living in your basement because he has a place to stay for right now, or the senior that can sort of afford their taxes right now, but they can't do it over time. And so they can stay there until they get off the waiting list. So what we see, and again, talk to the property managers, but what we see is that the folks that end up living in the housing already have a connection to the community. And so, but no, you can't say that the only people that can apply are people that currently live in the community. And you couldn't do that if it was market rate housing either.
Gina.
So, just to go back, there was an earlier comment around lighting, and I was aware of a state requirement, having done work on a few projects associated with the town of Morris and also Warren. I believe that there's a state requirement that makes sure that there's street lights that are not in keeping generally with the lights that tend to be in residential zones. Falls Village has also recently adopted dark skies principles in their regulations. Is there any way that you see that you could comply, or do you mind speaking further about the potential of a modification involved with the lighting?
Well, I'll just say, that, you know, for Dresser Woods, which just got permitted through Salisbury Planning and Zoning Commission, similar requirements again around you know, having lighting for affordable housing developments. There are requirements, CHAPA and others have requirements that you have specific, you know, lighting. So we'll make sure that we're meeting those requirements, but at least for the Dresser Woods project, we were also able to meet the dark skies requirements that Salisbury also has. So we'll look at all of that. I think, again, the idea was to try to not have so many lights.
Is the current standard 15-foot high posts? Is that, I'm recalling a standard that was due to a state requirement. It might be 18 feet posts. I don't quite recall that exact measurement, but I do know it came up for a Morris and a Warren approval, that the state requirement really trumped our local requirements.
I will double check that and figure out. I didn't think that there was a specific height. I just thought there was a specific like coverage area requirement.
Got it.
I'm happy to check that.
And also the downcast.
Of course, yeah,
Um,
just curious.
Anything further from the commission before we open it up? Thank you, commissioners. Public comment or questions, more than welcome. Please just raise your hand. Maybe stand up so those in attendance can hear you a little bit better, and we'll see how it goes. Dave.
Dave Barger, 6780 Road. Thank you for having this forum, first off, this evening. It's something that's long overdue. But I'm going to direct my question at the NCLC. And I'm going to ask, it sounds all very good, tying into the Blue Trail at Dean's Ravine. I'm a hiker from time to time. But what are your overall plans for that 68 acres that would complement both the Falls Village Housing Trust and Habitat for Humanity?
Great, so just so everyone knows, NCLC is a regional land trust. We work throughout Litchfield County and in northern Fairfield County. We currently protect over 14,000 acres in that region. We have 31 public nature preserves as of right now. That number, all of those numbers are always growing because we are looking at doing exceptional conservation projects throughout our region, and especially those where we would be doing a purchase. So this is one of those circumstances. So we, the land trust, we can buy land. We can buy land at the full appraised value. And when we do that, we also rely on state and federal funding. It's also, the majority of it is state funding with a small amount of federal funding. We also have a lot of other funding partners who are excited to fund our work and are ready to step in should we need contingencies for the federal funding. And as a part of those funding sources, we are required to turn any land that we're buying with that into a public nature preserve. So that's what we would be doing here. It's the majority, there is a map over there. I'm happy to walk anybody through it after the meeting if you'd like. That big green piece is what is going to be going into conservation. The exact lines might change depending on the requirements of the development that's happening. But generally speaking, that's what it's going to look like. And there will be a public parking area. And yep, so that's going to be, that's part of the easement that Jandy was talking about. So there will be public access, whether you live in any of the housing development that's around there or not. Anybody can come and access this. And there will be a connection from a new trail to the Blue Trail. So the Blue Trail will exist as it does right now.
And there will be a public parking area and a new trail system that will connect to it. And we will manage that just as we do our other 31 nature preserves.
Thank you very much, Amanda.
Do you know the distance approximately of the access trail to the blue trail, just given the,
No, we
Prospective.
don't know where the access trail is gonna be because we don't have a final
got it, got it.
configuration yet.
On the current property, you'd be looking, it's probably a quarter of a mile up the hillside.
Okay.
Keith? remember?
Yeah, probably,
Yeah, I mean, it requires some work, but we had 40 honor students from the University of Connecticut help us cleaning up some of that property back in 2021. So we made it a little bit more friendly, but it's rough and it gets washed out, so it requires maintenance. But it's about it's no more than a half a mile, but it's probably closer to a quarter of a mile.
And so one of the things that we do when we're developing a property into a public nature preserve is we see what's there. We see, is there washout that's gonna happen? Is that happening all the time? And then we try to route the trail into a manner that's both inviting for the public and a nice place to hike, but also is not gonna be a place that requires, daily maintenance to make sure that it's available to the public. So exactly what the configuration of the trail will be is to be determined.
Hi, I'm Ruth Mulvaney, I live on Route 7. And I had a question, I heard a reference to your Torrance-Murray health proposals. And if you could tell me on the affordable housing project, what those, because I know the planning and zoning reference and approval on someone else's approval, so I'm assuming have all the water. And so if you could elaborate on that, and I have a second part of my question is not on habitat, on. And, sorry.
Talking about
A lot of big referencing to funding here, funding. I haven't heard any figures other than the overall cost of each unit was $400,000 to $500,000, but I'm very unclear about Bank of Boston, how much you're getting for HUD. Only the infrastructure is going for HUD. How much, just if you could give a breakdown, what is your estimate for the total cost on the infrastructure and the total amount granted? And then on the next basis, if you can give some more definite costs since it's coming up next year. Thank you.
I will start with the approvals. Not only is Torrington Area Health happy with the newest zoning permit that we had just earlier this year. And but also the state is happy with our site, the 10 acres, little bit more, that we are purchasing from Habitat.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to know what the approvals were for, like, did you end up having your own water supply or?
Oh, so you're asking a different question. Okay,
Well, Torrance Area Health is involved in that as well, right?
yes, we have a company, just like the high school has. Most people don't know unless they've heard us say it before, that the high school has its own water company because there's no town water going there. They have their own water company. It was established along with the area, Torrington Area Health. And we are going to use the same model. It's even the same water company that's going to be doing ours. They come here, they check the water, with the chemicals, they make sure everything is safe. And they're using the same model water company as the high school has. It's very convenient.
State is what you're saying,
Yes.
have a letter that we could get a FOI or something from the state that approved that water company?
The water company handles that and it came through the environmental report too, that had to be done for the HUD funds to be released to us, which were released for our use in early June. So that's HUD oversees that. And now release doesn't mean we have money. Release means we're now at the point where we could start asking invoicing for the money. But the other thing I was going to say is that the state has been and walked the property, has seen our well sites, has approved them all. So we feel very confident in that. We're working very closely with them and they understand what we're doing.
So there is an approval in writing, is that correct?
We have approvals in writing. Yes.
Speak up when you. Oh, okay, I said, so there is a letter approving the water supply in writing from the state of Connecticut. Is that?
Yes, there will be another set of approvals once the wells are dug and all of the water has to be approved. So you probably know it's stages, so. But we have approvals thus far for everything that's been done and the well drilling that is planned. Yes.
Bob, I think that you were part of the original question, so why not hop right up there? You had an answer, I knew you did.
Well, Torrington Area Health obviously has to deeply be involved because we need to get septic system approvals and we need to get well approvals as well. We've done some very preliminary work, I should say. Keith has done some very preliminary work and is working closely with the Torrington Area Health people to determine what will be the optimal situation. But that's something we have to obviously overcome before we even come before planning and zoning. Apply for what the ultimate configuration of the project.
Still at the very early stage,
Very
just
Yeah.
done the soil testing and stuff out there.
Yeah, that's why I was asking about the one that's scheduled to finish.
Yeah.
Start next week.
And Keith, just not to put you on the spot, but because of your area of expertise, I believe that it will be subject to being a public water supply system.
It's
because
going
of
to
the
depend
number-
on how many units we end
Got
up with. So it's based on the number of units that we're serving, the number of bedroom count and everything that we're serving. Gallons per day of usage and stuff like that determines where you take over that line into being public water supply. So it's very up in the air right now.
Whether it's state, whether it's Torrington area.
Exactly.
Got it.
And so it's gonna very much depend on how many units we end up going with. How many bedrooms are in those units.
Coulter,
Yeah, hi, my name's Colter Rule and I'm a neighbor of Road along with Bob Anderson here. We've been there 30 years about, and we like it. We have acknowledged that this thing is going through and so be it. I have a few questions. There will be a lot of stormwater coming off that entire mountain. Off that 10 acres after it's cleared cut and then drainage and all that stuff happens. And now Habitat has jumped into the free. We'll have even more. My first question is, does Housing Trust own the property and when will you purchase it? Can you give me a simple answer on that, Jenny?
Yes, we have closing, I'm sorry, we have a sale, a contract of sale. We have not closed yet, but that will happen as soon as the federal shutdown opens up here.
They're gonna provide money for you to buy the property?
That is part of our grant. Yes,
I didn't know that.
Yes,
Okay, I
part-
thought that grant could
part
not
of-
be used for purchase, but now it can.
no, it's always been the grant that we have from essentially HUD that we got through Johanna Hayes' office.
Yeah.
That is budgeted out and part of it is the actual buying of the property.
Very good, thank you. When the stormwater comes off the property, does anyone know where it goes?
Yeah,
Downhill.
downhill.
And what is downhill?
It's going to go through that culvert that I was talking about before, which we're making larger because of the possibility of more stormwater
Right.
than that culvert has managed and has tolerated in the past.
Yeah, it's gone from 18 to 24, I believe, inches, if I'm not. Does anybody know where it goes then?
Probably to your house.
Just about. Goes diagonally across the ditch, up to the railroad tracks, and goes along the railroad tracks and goes down through a culvert across about 150 feet of my property. So I have strong interest on it, how that water is managed, how much water is going. My next question is, will you guarantee my well? And will you guarantee the fact that any effluent from your septic systems will not pollute my well? And what guarantees do I have that my well won't get sucked dry by 100 people? And that effluent from the septic system will not stink up our neighborhood? I'm curious. Are there any guarantees?
And I feel like all of these questions, I appreciate the questions, I understand them. They were all brought up during the planning and zoning permitting process.
Not really. Sort of.
I remember a lot of them being brought up during the plan. And I mean, again, we have professional civil engineers working on this project. They designed the stormwater management. They designed, I trust them. They work on a lot of other projects. This is their profession. Again, if you don't trust the state to, permit a water system that works, that's on you.
So if my well is polluted, I have recourse to go to the state and
Again, what I'm saying is that all of these questions were brought up during the permitting process.
they weren't answered.
Yeah, but I think we did answer.
Gotcha, thank you.
Well, I'd like to add a little bit to that.
Not too much.
Not too much. A little bit. First of all, the entire 10 acres that we are buying is not clear cut. That would be a total misconstruing of the truth. Only 5 acres nearest the road, the flattest portion, is going to be built on. So. Also, the civil engineers that are working with us have won 36 awards in environmental excellence. They do know what they're doing. And one of the things that they did before we drilled our test well was to check all the other wells around within, I think, 1,500 whatever. I don't remember the exact measurement. So they are very careful and thorough because they have to, as Jocelyn was saying, satisfy the permitting organizations, which are part of the state. So that's why all of these permitting processes exist, so that you don't have to be embroiled in fear that things are going to go wrong.
Okay, I have one more request. Could you please not work on Saturday? Is that too much? Can we not work?
I don't-
6 days a week?
I don't know what the agreement is, so I'm sorry, I can't
There
make
is
any
no-
promises.
The agreement is whatever you would.
The request has been noted, Coulter.
As a neighbor, I would request that you not work on Saturday.
So
or
noted,
Sunday.
noted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to see if I could get the figures, the second part of the question. If you could address some figures, like everybody keeps talking about, you have a grant for the infrastructure. I don't know how much that is. It's probably my lack of knowledge because I haven't looked it up, but, and then how much the overall project, if you could address, you said you were gonna do it in stages, so you obviously know the amount that you're doing for the infrastructure under the federal
Yeah.
grant.
So I'll-
Could you just go through the grant and the figures that go with it?
I will address to some degree your question. The first answer is, again, there's $750,000 is the the HUD Community Project Funding grant that came through Deanna Hayes' office. That isn't gonna pay for all of the infrastructure on the project. It will pay for the acquisition of the property and then as much infrastructure as we can get done for the remaining amount of money.
And how much is that infrastructure overall?
Well, what I'm saying is we have $750,000 to use on it,
I get
and
that.
then everything else,
So how much are you calculating for your cost for the infrastructure after purchase?
So. I don't, those numbers aren't, we haven't broken out the project budget. Basically, again, we got what we got from the federal government, which is $750. So we're using that for the acquisition, which of course we have to do.
Is how much the acquisition is
200,000.
150K.
150? Okay.
And then we use the rest of it for as much as we can, as much of the infrastructure as we can get done. We're
Costs.
We're
When
bidding-
anybody builds a house, you're not gonna.
Yeah, we're bidding it out, so we have an approximate cost, but we're bidding out the rest of the work that we can do for the $750 that we have in hand now. Beyond that, beyond,
Ruth,
once,
just let her answer.
once we bid that out, then we'll know exactly, when we pick a bidder, we'll know exactly what we can do for the amount of money we have left from federal funding. That's when we bid out the construction part of the project, find out exactly what it will cost to build all of the rest of it. And then we put that whole package together and apply to the state for the remaining funding that we need and potentially other funding sources if we need to.
So I think it would be fair to say, I'm trying to, I understand your question, I understand you answering what you can. I think it's what I'm hearing and maybe interpreting, correct me one way or the other. But you have an approximation of
Yeah.
upwards of $400,000 per unit. You don't know until you put it out to bid. Your granting agency, and I'm not gonna remember, it's a state, but
Department of Housing.
okay, Department of Housing. They understand that you're coming forth with a need
Right.
upwards of 8 million minus 750, so $7.25 million. But
But they
they need to have your bidding documents
Exactly.
and they need to have your estimates and qualified bidders in
Exactly.
order to award any money.
Right.
So it's a hard exact answer, but I think $7.25 million is a ballpark figure, give or take, depending. And I'm not trying to answer for them, but
But I think it is a good answer, and I think what you were starting to say, Ruth, I have to answer here. It is very different from building a house. You have to know where your money is coming from at the beginning when you're building a house. When you're building affordable housing, going through all the regulations, and they change. You know, you remember, we had to have an archaeological dig. Right, because
It's always been required on most projects of any size.
well, no, this was something new that came along that, anyway, that cost $8,000, that wasn't budgeted. So things happen and when you're working with a funding agency, it has to be to their timeline. But I can assure you that DOH, largely in part of Jocelyn's good work with them, they think of us, they think of River Road Homes as their project. They are interested in us, they've invested a lot of money in us, and they think of us as the little engine that could. So here we are.
Stephen,
Counselor, from your expertise on other projects, when someone gives a timeline of 2 years, let's say by 2027, do most of those projects finish within that timeline based on funding and based on project timeline completions? Do they go over by 30%, 40%? Do you find that they can stay within those timelines of a 2-year period? Or do you feel that from your experience, this could go to 3 years or could go to 3.5 years?
I can just, I mean, I can talk to you about specifically, for example, Salem Village 3, which is our most recent new construction project. 10 new construction units over at Salem Village. Those took, I think 13 months to finish. Again, I don't expect from the time you start construction, you know, you've vetted out, you've got a contractor, they're committed, you have a contract. They want to get the work done too. So, you know, the slowdowns at Salem Village were more about the subcontractors getting you know, the plumbers and the, you know, I think like the, appliances took forever, like little bits of things, but the major part of the construction for sure was done, you know, within, I'd say, you know, I think 10 months. And then it was really the inside stuff, you know, some of the finish work that took a few more months to get finished. But I think once we break ground, it really shouldn't take more than, again, the infrastructure piece is separate, but once we start actually constructing the units, it shouldn't take more than, you know, 12 or 13 months to be complete. And again, much of the work, once you get you know, the houses, you know, framed in, is inside the units, so.
So Jocelyn, just to piggyback on that for a minute, so you talked about like potentially you have $7.5 million of construction costs that you don't quite have funding for today. So what's the biggest project that you've done and been involved in? Like, is the state gonna write a check for $7.5 million in 2027 to pay off the rest of the construction costs? Have you done a project that big where they've written a check that big?
Yes. And we're gonna construct it and then have them write a check. They commit to the money before we break ground. They commit to the money before we sign a contract with a contractor to start the project. So, I expect that we'll have a commitment from Department of Housing by, you know, next summer, I'd say. So we can have that conversation again next summer if you want. Yeah, we're not gonna start construction until we have that commitment of funds. And usually Department of Housing, normally these projects take on a little bit of debt, but, basically the rents pay the operating costs. And so the project really can't support a lot of debt. This might have, say, maybe $500,000 of bank debt in it, and that might be a construction loan, but the rest of it is committed by Department of Housing before you break ground and dispersed throughout the project. So instead of getting a regular construction mortgage, for example, you have the state money that gets dispersed as work is completed.
Thank you.
Denise?
My question is more about the units and that now there's more units, but. And it's not questioning legality or any of that of the IHC application, and it has nothing to do with density. But the application approved by the selectmen that went to P and Z, that went to distributed, presented to the public, to the state and back to P and Z. More than 20 times in it, it says maximum of 14 units on the entire parcel. When I talked to Miguel, got his last name. He didn't think it would be a problem to get it approved for additional units, but there is a process to go through. And he agreed it's not a density issue. My concern is if the entire parcel was, for good reasons, limited to only 14 units, how are we putting on possibility of 26 with one environmentally and two without? That was my question.
So it has been approved, no, I'm just kind of looking, that's as far as I have
Okay.
I mean, the project was approved as presented. I understand the question. I was to phrase it in a more, if there are approvals needed further from this, are you aware if there's any? Dave or Bob, are you aware of any approvals, any communications you've had with the state? about modifying the numbers originally discussed back at the initial stages of the application to the state.
All I would say was that the initial drawings, which were part of that process, were only about the section of the IHC, which, I mean, except of Habitat's acreage, which was going to be an option for purchase by us. And that I understood from everyone I spoke to, that the 14 was just a possibility. And the approvals, the actual approvals that came down when we actually had a plan by architects and engineers were accepted and approved at 16. Now, adding in a different area of acreage for Habitat, adding their housing, I have no idea about that.
And that is probably something that will have to be looked at by Habitat moving forward, because it's one dedicated IHC zone. It just so happens that it's being split, so that'll be an answer, I think, forthcoming, but I don't think there's really an answer for it tonight from Habitat,
Can I just follow up real quick?
maybe.
The IHC approval from the selectmen, the P and Z, to the public, to the state, back to P and Z, is a maximum of 14 units on the entire parcel.
Yeah.
That's the way it was approved in each and every step, and according to the state, to change that, even with the lot line or add more, you need to go through the approval process. So I understand that Habitat is separate and all that, but what was approved by all these different pieces was a maximum of 14 on the whole parcel. And environmentally, that scares me to put so much more on there. That land hasn't changed.
Major statement.
Thank you.
Perhaps I could recommend
I'm going
that.
to talk to Miguel about it.
Good.
And the environmental review is for the environmental review that has been accepted by the state, and everyone else is respective of the 16 units, so that's
Okay.
when I can come.
Walter, before I call on you again,
Just
no,
wondering why-
hold on. Before I call on you again, is there anybody new that would like to ask a question? No. Coulter, feel free.
Yeah, one quick question. Johnson was talking about getting this approval very easily from DOH for $8 million, et cetera, et cetera. Why can't you wait to clear cut until that is approved? Why do you need to clear cut the lot and put in infrastructure, $500,000 after you spend 200,000, 150,000 to buy it? Out of your 750, you've got 600,000. So why don't you wait until you get your $7 million from DOH before you clear cut and put your infrastructure in? I don't get that.
Stephen,
Coulter,
I think I can answer. They've stated that they're using the beginning money to not clear cut to a portion of the property. They're gonna do infrastructure based off of that, and then they have to get their money. They can't do it all in.
Okay, so it's covered.
So they have to, they sort of already stated that it's the stages where you have to then bid it out, get all your things done, and then you get your money. So that's the way they
Yeah.
explained it a couple times.
Very, thank you.
do you guys concur with that answer?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no, I just figured.
Anybody else? You guys are amazing. We're gonna come in under time. You sure? Must be. Oh, Eileen, I knew there was. Well,
This is for the NCLS or NCLC. In our POCD, we're going into open space and recreation. So it's encouraging to hear what you're tying into the food trail. Is there any future idea of putting more trail into that space? Or someone just walking their dog around the whole property?
Yes, absolutely. It's not, we,
Bicycles and walking and,
bicycles is a different question.
okay,
And we have not done an analysis of the property to see if this one could support bicycles. But whenever we do a public nature preserve, we always do everything we can to make sure that there are a variety of different root blocks. Nobody, in our experience, in my own personal experience, we don't like an out and back trail. People want to enter, do a loop, and then come back. So that's the way we would be designing a public nature preserve. We would ensure that there is a connection to the blue trail so that those who want to do a longer walk can do so through this.
Thank you.
Just to add on to that, there's a great deal of they call wood road that exist on the property today that were in use when the quarry was in business. And those are still very open and very accessible for public walking. And as I've understood, many people have taken advantage of that because there's no restrictions for people going up on the property today.
One more, are you aware that the United States of America owns property contiguous to your property? Are you
Yes.
aware of that neighborhood?
Yes,
Do you know what's, gotta be at least 50 or 80 or 100 acres now, do you know?
I don't.
Yeah, it's very large, very large.
It has no bearing on any of the projects because the property that you're referring to, which is on the south side of our property.
Right,
Unfortunately goes straight on.
it is terribly steep, you're
Yeah.
right.
So it's
Goes across.
way up at the top.
Anything further? Seeing none,
Do you want to?
yes, please feel free, no way out to look at the map, ask any questions. It's a exciting prospect for tonight. Really want to thank these two organizations and your helpers. It's not easy to sit up here looking out at this number of faces. And I want to thank everybody for being so respectful and kind to these people brave enough to sit up here. It means a lot to me as the moderator this evening that it didn't really take any moderating. So thanks for taking the pressure off of me.
Thank you.
Very well, you might go home and sit on this and come up with a question or another comment. I believe both organizations would be more than willing for a polite communication directly with them. If for some reason the planning and zoning can be of any help, feel free to communicate with us. So with that, motion to adjourn. Stephen, is there a second? Eileen, all in favor? Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
When we buy the property, they're grateful. Some of the things we should have. Are being